I was never the kind of man who needed much. Give me my old recliner, a cold beer, and my wife humming in the kitchen, and I'd call it a good day. At 72, I figured I'd earned a little peace. 48 years with the same woman, 2 kids grown and gone, a few grandkids who lit up my Sundays. That was more than enough for me. Life had finally settled into a rhythm I could count on. Then came my younger brother, Rick. Rick had always been the wild one, charming, impulsive, with a smile that could sell sand in the desert. But charm doesn't pay alimony. After his 3rd divorce, he showed up on my doorstep with nothing but a duffel bag and that same damn grin. "Don't worry, Jack," he said. "Just need a place to crash for a bit while I get back on my feet." And like a fool, I let him in. I had my doubts, sure, but he was my little brother. Blood. And I remembered how he looked when we were kids, wide-eyed, trying to keep up with me on his bike, scraping his knees on the gravel but never once crying. I figured maybe life had just knocked him down a little harder this time. My wife, Lorraine, wasn't thrilled. "How long is a bit exactly?" she asked one night while we were getting ready for bed. I told her it wouldn't be long. Rick just needed a soft place to land. Weeks passed, then months. Rick didn't seem to be climbing out of his hole. He wasn't looking for work seriously. He'd sleep late, flirt with the cashier at the grocery store, charm the neighbors, but no real progress. Still, Lorraine never complained. She even started cooking his favorite meals. Said she felt bad for him. I told myself I was imagining things. I'd catch them laughing a little too long at the dinner table. She'd pour him coffee just the way he liked it, even before I asked for mine. But after all these years with Lorraine, I trusted her more than I trusted my own instincts. I chalked it up to pity. She was just being kind to my broken brother. Looking back, that's the moment I should have opened my eyes. That's when the cracks started showing. But I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to believe the woman I shared half a century with could be hiding something from me. Turns out, rock bottom wasn't Rick's. It was mine. And I hadn't even hit it yet. Rick settled into our home like a weed in a garden, uninvited but thriving. He slept in the guest room, but he spent most of his time in the living room or kitchen, where Lorraine always seemed to be. I tried to keep my suspicions buried under layers of rational thought. After all, what would a woman like Lorraine want with my screw-up of a brother? Still, the signs were there. Only I was too blind or too proud to acknowledge them. I noticed she stopped asking me if I wanted seconds at dinner. She used to fix my plate with all the care of a woman who'd done it for decades. Now Rick's plate was the one that looked like a Thanksgiving special. She even started putting hot sauce on his, which she knew I hated on mine. Little things. Quiet changes. One Saturday morning I came into the kitchen to find them standing closer than they should have been. Lorraine was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. When she saw me, she pulled away fast, too fast. Rick just grinned like nothing had happened and offered me a cup of coffee. I didn't take it. Instead, I said I was going to the hardware store. I didn't need anything from the hardware store. I just needed air. I sat in the truck for 30 minutes before I could even turn the key. That night, I asked Lorraine if she was happy. She gave me a tired smile and said, "Of course, Jack. Why would you ask that?" I shrugged. "Just feels like things are different." She kissed my cheek and told me not to overthink, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Rick was charming. He charmed everyone. Lorraine was just trying to make him feel welcome. He was family. And family helps family, right? Still, I started noticing the way his cologne lingered in our bathroom, not just the guest one, or how our laundry seemed to take twice as long, with clothes I didn't recognize cycling through the wash. I asked Lorraine once if she'd seen my flannel shirt, the one she gave me for our 40th anniversary. She said she hadn't. A week later, I saw Rick wearing it while drinking beer on the porch. I should have knocked him off that porch right then, but I didn't, because I still wanted to believe my brother was just lost, not evil, and that my wife was just kind, not unfaithful. That kind of faith can kill a man. And I was starting to feel the cracks spreading in my chest, like an old oak splitting down the middle. But I wasn't ready to break just yet. I just didn't realize how much more I was about to lose. A house doesn't lie. It creaks differently when something's wrong. Maybe it was just age, or maybe it was me, but the silence between the walls had changed. It used to be filled with the familiar rhythms of life. Lorraine humming while folding laundry, the distant drone of daytime TV, my own slow steps across the floor. Now it felt like the house was holding its breath, like it knew a secret and was waiting for me to catch up. I tried to stay busy, fixed a few cabinet hinges that didn't need fixing, repainted a fence that no one but me ever noticed. Anything to keep me from thinking too hard. But even in the backyard, I could hear Rick's laugh echoing from the kitchen window, followed by Lorraine's voice, low and sweet like it used to be when we were young and still in love. I started sleeping worse, tossing, turning, waking up to the cold side of the bed more often than not. Lorraine said she had trouble sleeping too, and had started falling asleep on the couch watching TV. That might have made sense, if Rick hadn't been on the same couch every night. One night, around 2 in the morning, I got up to use the bathroom. I passed the living room and paused. The lights were off, but I heard murmuring. 2 voices, close together. I stepped quietly, the way old men do when they don't want to hear what they already know. I didn't see anything, just shadows. Her silhouette leaned toward his. I couldn't make out their words, but their tones told the story. There was no anger, no sorrow. Just something too soft, too familiar. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds before I turned back to the bedroom. The next morning, Lorraine was in the kitchen early. She looked tired, but there was a brightness to her I hadn't seen in years. She handed me a cup of coffee and kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile. I decided to give Rick a little test that day. Told him an old fishing buddy of mine had offered him a job at a marina 2 towns over. It wasn't real, of course, but I wanted to see how serious he was about getting back on his feet. He scoffed, said it didn't pay enough, said he wasn't built for grunt work. Then he leaned back in my recliner, and asked what was for dinner. It took everything in me not to knock the smirk off his face. That evening, I watched Lorraine set 2 extra plates instead of 1. I watched her laugh at his dumb jokes like he was the most interesting man in the room. And I realized my home wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. And I was just a ghost, haunting the halls of a life I thought I still had. But ghosts don't forget. And I was starting to remember everything I'd sacrificed for that ungrateful bastard. I started watching them more closely after that night. Not in an obvious way, no yelling, no accusations. I've lived long enough to know that the truth doesn't need to be dragged out by force. It leaks. It seeps through cracks in stories, through glances that last too long, and words that don't quite fit. And the truth was leaking all over my damn house. One Tuesday morning, Lorraine left her phone on the kitchen table. That alone was strange. She guarded that thing like a teenager. I stared at it for a full minute, heart pounding like I was about to commit a crime. And maybe I was, but when your gut's screaming, sometimes you have to listen. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, anger. A quiet, old man kind of anger. The kind that simmers and never leaves. There were no messages from Rick. Not under his name, anyway. But there was someone labeled R. I opened the thread. I wish I hadn't. Last night was amazing. I miss your touch already. He doesn't suspect a thing. Poor Jack. I wish we could just leave this place and not look back. I stood there staring at the screen, barely breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me standing there, empty and stupid. Lorraine came back into the room, humming like always. She froze when she saw me with her phone. She didn't even try to lie. Jack. I didn't say a word. I set the phone down gently, walked past her, and out the door. I drove around for hours. Didn't know where I was going. Just away. The cornfields blurred past. The radio played static. I kept thinking about how many years I'd spent building a life with her. All the quiet mornings, the anniversaries, the doctor visits, the funerals, the birthdays. All of it now twisted into a joke I didn't get. I pulled over near an old fishing spot we used to take the kids to. Sat on a rotting bench and watched the sun go down over the water. That was the first time I truly felt old. Not in my bones, but in my heart. Like I'd finally hit a wall I couldn't climb over. When I got home, Rick was in my chair again, feet up, beer in hand like he owned the place. Lorraine was in the kitchen, pretending nothing had changed. Maybe, for them, nothing had. But for me, everything was burning, and I was finally starting to smell the smoke. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table and waited for them to come downstairs. The coffee was already brewed. Bacon was sizzling in the pan. Lorraine used to say the smell of bacon could make even the worst morning feel like home. But not today. Today, it just felt like the final note in a song that had already ended. Rick came in first, shirtless, barefoot, grinning like he hadn't just destroyed a man's world. He nodded at me like we were still brothers. I didn't nod back. "Morning, Jack," he said, stretching. "You're up early." I didn't answer. Lorraine followed a few minutes later, hair still damp from the shower. She paused when she saw me sitting there, her eyes flicking to the seat across from me like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. She wasn't. I let the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of it. Then I slid her phone across the table toward her. "Unlock it," I said. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. I could see it in her eyes. Panic, guilt, maybe a little shame, though not nearly enough. She entered her code. I pulled up the messages and read them aloud. Slowly. Every. Last. One. Rick shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Lorraine turned pale. When I finished, I stood up and poured myself a cup of coffee. Calm as a surgeon. "Was it worth it?" I asked them. Neither of them spoke. "You two think I'm some old fool who wouldn't notice, that I'd just sit here while you turn my home into a motel for your little love story." Rick opened his mouth. I raised my hand to silence him. "I gave you everything," I said. "I let you into my home, fed you, clothed you. You couldn't even sleep on my couch without turning it into a betrayal." He tried again. "Jack, look. You're not my brother anymore," I said flatly. Lorraine stepped forward. "Jack, please, we didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed, short and bitter. "You didn't mean for it to happen? How many nights did it take before you meant it?" She didn't answer. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. Still warm, still strong, just like me. "You're both going to pack your things? You've got until the end of the day?" Lorraine gasped. "Jack, where will we go?" "That's not my problem," I said. "You made your bed. Now go share it. Somewhere else." I left them there, standing in the kitchen that used to feel like mine, now hollowed out by betrayal. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't shed a tear. But that was the day I stopped being quiet. And the man they thought they could walk all over? He was gone. By sundown, the house was quiet again. Not the uneasy kind of quiet I'd gotten used to. The kind that whispers, lies between laughs and footsteps. But a real quiet. Honest. Heavy. Cleansing. They were gone. Lorraine packed a suitcase. Rick grabbed his duffel, the same one he came with, still crumpled and half-zipped. They didn't fight me on it. Maybe they knew they couldn't. Or maybe they didn't care enough to try. I didn't watch them leave. I stood out back, staring at the old oak tree we planted the year our first grandson was born. Its roots were deep, strong, just like I used to believe our family was. Now I wasn't sure if anything we'd built had ever been real, or if I'd just been the only one trying to hold it all together. After the sound of Rick's truck faded down the road, I went back inside. The living room looked cleaner without his mess all over it. My recliner was empty again, waiting. I sat down slowly, almost afraid it would reject me after everything. But it didn't. It welcomed me like an old friend who'd been patiently waiting for me to come to my senses. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I woke up to birdsong and the smell of coffee. My own, this time. No one else in the kitchen. No one else's footsteps on the stairs. Just me and the quiet hum of a house starting to heal. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. I walked through every room that day. Opened closets, checked drawers, threw out whatever was theirs. Clothes, toothbrushes, cheap cologne, a pair of earrings I never remembered buying Lorraine. Gone. Every trace of them. Like smoke from a fire long put out. I found myself in my bedroom. The closet looked half empty without her clothes. Her side of the bed still held the shape of her. I stripped the sheets, opened the windows, let the wind carry her scent away. She'd left a note on the nightstand. I didn't read it. I burned it in the fireplace. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was reclaiming what they'd stolen. My dignity, my peace, my home. I called my daughter later that day, told her Lorraine had moved out, left it at that. She didn't press. Maybe she already knew something wasn't right. Maybe kids always know, even when they stay quiet about it. She invited me over for dinner next weekend. Said the grandkids had missed me. I smiled. A real smile. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The same porch where Rick used to lounge like a king in a borrowed castle. Now it was mine again. And it was never going to be his. They took a piece of my life, but not all of it. I still had time. I still had strength. And I had a plan. Because what they didn't know was, I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The thing about betrayal is, once you've tasted it, you start seeing the world differently. Clearer, sharper. Like someone wiped fog off the mirror and suddenly, everything you ignored stares you right in the face. I wasn't just angry, I was awake. And I wasn't going to waste that clarity. See, I might be old, but I've still got more life behind me than most folks have ahead, and that comes with one hell of a toolbox. I'm not talking about the wrenches in my garage. I'm talking about patience, memory, the ability to play the long game without blinking. Rick had always been impulsive, always chasing the next thrill, the next woman, the next handout. And Lorraine? She liked comfort, liked things neat, easy, familiar. So while they were off playing house together somewhere, I knew the shine would wear off fast. He'd get bored, she'd get bitter. And when the cracks started showing in their little fantasy, I'd be ready. But first, I needed to rebuild. Not for them, for me. I started with the house, repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, bought a new mattress and threw out the one we'd shared for nearly 5 decades. I even tossed the old wedding photos. Not in anger, just in truth. They didn't belong to the man I was now. I made a list of everything Rick had borrowed and never returned over the years. Tools, money, favors, support. I wrote it all down, not because I wanted it back, but because I was done pretending it didn't matter. The man took, and now he'd taken the one thing I thought was untouchable. My wife. But here's the thing about takers. They never stop unless someone makes them. And I plan to make him stop. I called a friend of mine, Tommy, who runs a small construction crew, asked if he'd heard from Rick recently. Turns out Rick had reached out, trying to land a gig, said he had experience with heavy labor. That made me laugh. Rick never lifted anything heavier than a 6-pack. Tommy told him no, but he promised to keep me posted if he popped up again. Next, I called a buddy at the credit union, just to get a sense of what Rick might be trying to pull. I never co-signed anything for him, thank God. But I knew my brother. If he was out there, he was scheming. And if Lorraine was with him, she was funding it. She always managed the money, always knew which accounts were full, which bills were due. I trusted her with every cent. That trust was gone now, and I had to make sure they hadn't left me with more than just a broken heart. Turned out, 2 weeks before I kicked them out, she'd opened a joint account. Not with me, with someone named Richard E. Carter. Rick's full name. She'd transferred $18,000, gone, just like that. But I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because now I had something real to work with. They thought they'd used me, but I was just getting started. It's funny how fast people show their true colors when they think they've won. Rick and Lorraine had been gone less than a month when the first little crack appeared in their happy facade. I was in town, grabbing groceries, when I ran into Brenda Collins, longtime neighbor, notorious gossip, never missed a beat. She came up to me by the produce section, pretending to inspect a head of lettuce like it owed her money. "Well, Jack," she said with a tight little smile, "guess you heard your brother and Lorraine moved into that condo over on Maple Hill, top floor, real fancy?" I hadn't heard, but I didn't show it. "Nice area," I said. "Bit out of Rick's price range, don't you think?" Brenda leaned in like we were sharing state secrets. "Oh, I'm sure it's Lorraine footing the bill. She always did have a taste for things she didn't earn." I gave her a polite nod and moved on, but the words stayed with me. Condo, top floor, Maple Hill. I knew the place. Too expensive for Rick. Even with Lorraine's savings, it wouldn't last. Not with Rick's spending habits and her need for control. They were a fire lit at both ends. That night, I dug deeper. I pulled out Lorraine's old laptop. She'd left it behind, probably too flustered to think straight. And sure enough, she'd saved everything. Banking info, emails, even a document labeled retirement plan with both their names listed. She hadn't deleted a damn thing. It felt like reading someone else's life story, only I was the discarded chapter. They had plans to start some kind of event business of all things. Rick, a logistics coordinator. Lorraine, the financial director. A perfect fantasy built on stolen money and delusion. There were even emails to a few local vendors, most unread, some flagged as urgent. No one had responded, because no one takes Rick seriously. Not in business, not in life. And soon, not even Lorraine would. The best part? One email caught my eye. A message from Lorraine to a man named Todd Palmer, a name I knew all too well. Todd ran a small winery in the next county. He also happened to be Lorraine's high school sweetheart, the one that got away. The message was short, but the tone wasn't hard to read. "Hope you're well. Just reaching out to see if you'd be interested in catching up sometime. Things have been complicated lately. Would love to talk." And there it was, the mask slipping. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. They weren't in love. Not really. Lorraine was already reaching for a life raft, and Rick didn't even know the boat was sinking. I didn't need to destroy them. I just had to wait. They were going to do it to each other, and I'd be there, quietly watching, when it all came crashing down.
People like Rick don't collapse all at once. No, they unravel in pieces. Small, stupid, avoidable mistakes that snowball into disasters. And Lorraine, she was too used to being the smartest person in the room to realize she'd chained herself to an anchor. I didn't have to interfere. I just had to observe. About a week after Brenda tipped me off, I got another piece of the puzzle, this time from someone I actually trusted, my grandson, Evan. He was home from college, helping me with some yard work. Smart kid, quiet. Eyes like his mother's, sharp and skeptical. "You know, Grandpa," he said, tossing mulch into the garden bed, "I saw Uncle Rick the other day. He was yelling at some guy in the parking lot behind the liquor store. Full-on screaming match." I played dumb. "That so?" Evan nodded. Said something about being screwed over and needing his money back. Then he stormed off in that rusty truck he always drives. That told me everything I needed. Rick was already desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. That night I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into social media. Lorraine had never bothered updating her privacy settings, and Rick's profile was wide open, like a diary written by a narcissist. His page was full of selfies in sunglasses, quotes about grinding and starting over, and filtered photos of wine glasses on balconies. But the captions told the real story. Some people say they've got your back until you need them. Never again will I trust anyone who lies with a smile. Big moves coming, watch this space. Classic Rick, always loudest when his life's falling apart. Lorraine's profile was quieter, more careful. But one picture stood out. Her, sitting alone on a patio that definitely wasn't theirs. No Rick, no wine glass, just a caption. Rethinking everything. So the cracks had spread. I wanted to feel satisfied. I wanted to say, serves you right. But what I actually felt was stillness, like watching a storm wreck the neighbor's house after they ignored every warning. There's no joy in it, just confirmation. They'd betrayed me. But now they were betraying each other, and I knew it wouldn't be long before one of them tried to crawl back. I was right. 2 days later, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't in the mood for surprises. Afterward, I listened. Lorraine's voice came through, small and unsure. Jack, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but things aren't going well. I made a mistake. A lot of mistakes. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just needed to talk. Please call me back. I didn't. I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and let the breeze wash over me. They'd set fire to everything, and now they were choking on the smoke. A week passed. Then another. I didn't return her call. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because, for once, silence was louder than any words I could offer. Let her sit with the weight of it. Let her wonder how it felt to reach out and get nothing back. She deserved that. But she didn't stop trying. Voicemail after voicemail, spaced just far enough apart to suggest she was wrestling with herself. Each message was a little softer, a little more fractured. At first she tried to sound composed. Then came the cracks. By the fourth message, her voice broke halfway through. I know I hurt you, Jack. I don't even know how to explain what happened. I wasn't myself. Rick, he's not who I thought he was, and I'm not who I thought I was either. I miss you. I miss home. Home? That word caught me off guard. She left our home, our life, our name, our future. And now, with the fantasy falling apart, she dared to want it back. Rick never called. Of course he didn't. He was probably too busy scrambling to cover whatever financial hole he'd dug. But he was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes from a man trying to keep the pieces of a lie from falling out of his hands. That's when I got another call, but this one I answered. It was Tommy, the construction buddy who owed me more than a few favors. Thought you might want to know, he said. Rick showed up at Johnson's Lumber asking around for side work. Looked like hell. Said his business venture fell through. I chuckled. That the phrase he used? Word for word, Tommy said, laughing. Guy's a walking cliché. I thanked him, hung up, and stared out the window for a long time. So it was unraveling faster than I thought. The condo wouldn't last long. Rick couldn't handle failure. Not when there was no one left to blame. And Lorraine. She had spent decades building a life that was solid, dependable, clean. With me. Now she was stuck in a mess with a man-child whose charm faded the second rent was due. I figured it wouldn't be long before one of them showed up at my door. I was wrong. They both did. Late one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find them standing there, together, but not close. Lorraine looked tired, older even. Rick looked like hell. Sunken eyes, wrinkled shirt, desperate smile. "Jack," Lorraine started. I held up a hand. "No," I said, voice calm. "You talk, I listen, then you leave." They nodded, and just like that, the floor opened beneath them, because they thought they'd come to ask for forgiveness. But what they got was the beginning of a reckoning. I stepped back and let them in, not out of kindness, but curiosity. I wanted to see what two liars looked like when their lies stopped working, wanted to hear the desperation in their voices, the cracks in their stories, the regret they couldn't fake fast enough. They walked in slowly, like they weren't sure if the floor would hold them. Lorraine looked around like the house might still remember her. Rick didn't even look me in the eye. He went straight to the recliner, my recliner, and froze when he saw it had been moved to the opposite side of the room. Good. Let him feel out of place. Let him feel what I felt in my own home for months. We sat. I said nothing. Lorraine broke first. "Jack, I know there's nothing I can say to make this right. I hurt you. I betrayed everything we built. But I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I let him take advantage of that." She nodded toward Rick. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tensed. He chimed in then. "Look, man, I know I messed up. I was in a bad place. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed, cold and sharp. "You didn't mean to sleep with my wife?" He looked away. Lorraine closed her eyes. "You came into my home," I said, voice rising. "A home I built with her over half a lifetime. You ate my food, slept under my roof, and every time I offered you a hand, you bit it." Neither of them said a word. I leaned forward. "You think I'm just going to hand that all back? You think you can just walk in here, cry a little, say sorry, and I'll forget the months I spent thinking I was crazy?" Lorraine finally looked at me, tears welling. "I don't expect forgiveness. I came here because I realized what I gave up, what I threw away." She reached into her purse and placed a manila envelope on the table. "It's all that's left of the account. I closed it. What's yours is yours again." I didn't touch it. Rick shifted in his seat. "Things went south fast, Jack. The business fell through. We're broke, Lorraine. She's been staying with a friend. I've been living out of the truck." I almost pitied them, almost. But then I remembered the texts, the laughing behind my back, the way Rick wore my clothes and sat in my chair while ruining the life I gave him access to. And pity turned to something colder. "You two had a choice," I said. "You didn't trip into this. You built it, one lie at a time." I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. "I let you in once. I won't do it again." Rick muttered something under his breath, but Lorraine grabbed his arm and pulled him up. She looked back one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. "So am I." Then I shut the door behind them, and this time I locked it. Not just to keep them out, but to keep me in control, in peace, in a future that didn't need either of them. After they left, I stood in the quiet for a long while, just listening. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, no hushed voices behind my back. Just peace. It's strange how you can live with someone for decades and still not notice when they've begun to rot from the inside. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I chose not to. But once the door closed behind them, I realized something I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. Not anger, not sadness. Relief. They were finally out of my life, fully. Not just physically, but spiritually. Like some slow poison had finally drained from my system. I sat in my recliner, and looked at the envelope Lorraine had left. I didn't want to touch it. It felt like blood money. But curiosity's a hard thing to kill. I opened it. Bank statements, printouts. A cashier's check for just over $4,300, what was left of the $18,000 she'd taken. The rest? Gone. Blown on rent, wine, and whatever dumb dream Rick had sold her. It should have made me furious, but it didn't. It made me realize just how little they'd actually taken from me. Because money comes and goes. But peace? That's earned. I went outside and walked to the edge of my property. There's an old bench under the walnut tree where Lorraine and I used to sit after dinner, back when things were still simple. I hadn't been there since she left. The wood creaked under my weight. The breeze was light. The smell of cut grass and late summer filled the air. I watched a pair of squirrels fight over an acorn and chuckled to myself. Somehow, that little scrap between two rodents felt more honest than anything I'd seen from Rick in months. Later I called my daughter again, told her I was thinking of doing some traveling, maybe visit the Grand Canyon like her mother and I always planned. She sounded surprised, happy even. "You sure, Dad? You've always been kind of a homebody." "Not anymore," I said, because now that I had my home back, I could finally leave it on my own terms, not to escape pain, but to chase something better. The past was heavy, but it walked out the door wearing Rick's boots and Lorraine's perfume, and I wasn't dragging that weight any further. That night I slept with the windows open, no fear, no guilt. Just fresh air and the quiet creak of an honest house. In the distance, thunder rolled, storms were coming, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already survived the worst one. A few weeks passed. I started walking more, eating better, even shaving every morning again. It wasn't about looking good. It was about feeling like myself, the version of me that existed before betrayal sunk its teeth in. Then, one Thursday morning, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Aunt Maggie passed," the voice said. "The service is Saturday. Thought you should know." Aunt Maggie was my mother's sister, lived well into her 90s, tough woman, didn't take crap from anyone. She and I had been close once, but time and grief had stretched the family thin like old rope. Still, I felt I owed her a proper goodbye. So I dug out my dark suit, pressed the wrinkles out myself, and drove the 2 hours north to a quiet chapel just outside of Cedarville. It was a simple service, quiet, honest, the kind Maggie would have liked. No fake tears, no dramatic speeches, just stories from people who really knew her. But halfway through, I felt it. That chill, that slow burn in your gut that tells you you're not alone. I turned my head, and there they were. Rick and Lorraine, sitting 2 pews behind me. He looked worse than the last time, face sunken, tie wrinkled, posture like a kicked dog. Lorraine had cleaned up, but the sadness clung to her like a wet coat. Her eyes locked on me, and for a moment, time froze. I turned back toward the altar. This wasn't about them. It wasn't their day. After the service, people mingled outside. I kept to myself, shaking a few hands, giving quiet hugs. But of course, they found me. "Jack," Lorraine said softly. Her voice barely carried over the wind. I didn't answer, just kept my hands in my coat pockets. Rick stepped up beside her, awkward and twitchy. "Didn't think we'd see you here." I looked at him and said flatly, "Family buries family, even the ones who never stabbed me in the back." He winced like I'd slapped him. Lorraine stepped closer. "We're no longer together." I raised an eyebrow. "What a shock." She bit her lip. "He's living with a friend. I'm staying in a small rental downtown. Everything fell apart, Jack. I just thought you should know. I sighed, not from pain, but from exhaustion. You thought I should know you finally got what you asked for? I said. You picked ashes and now you're choking on the smoke. I don't need an update. I need distance. She nodded, eyes glossy. You have it. Rick looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe something cruel, maybe something stupid. But he didn't. Maybe even he knew it was too late. I walked away, got in my truck, started the engine. As I pulled out, I caught one last glimpse of them in the mirror, smaller than I remembered, shrunken by the weight of their own choices. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel righteous. I just felt free. After the funeral, something in me shifted. I'd faced them again, stared into the wreckage they made, and walked away without flinching. No shaking hands, no weight on my chest, just calm. I never thought peace would feel so quiet, so steady, so earned. But peace has a strange way of making you look backward, even while you're moving forward. And one night, sitting on the porch with the cicadas buzzing and a glass of bourbon in my hand, I found myself wondering, what would I have said if I'd known it all before? So I wrote a letter, not for Lorraine, not even for Rick, for myself. I found an old yellow notepad in the kitchen drawer, the one Lorraine used to keep grocery lists on. I tore a page from the middle and began to write. Dear Jack, you saw what you wanted to see. You trusted too much, forgave too quickly, and stayed silent too long. But none of that makes you weak. You believed in love, in loyalty, in family. And that belief got twisted by the very people you held closest. It's not your fault they fell short. You gave your brother a home when the world kicked him out. You gave your wife a lifetime, more than she deserved. And when they betrayed you, you didn't burn it all to the ground. You didn't turn bitter. You stood your ground and made them leave with their lies. That was strength, not revenge, not rage, just truth. And now that you've reclaimed your life, don't waste it mourning what was never real. Don't look for closure in people who never opened up in the first place. This new chapter, it's yours, not theirs, so go live it. Me, I folded the letter and tucked it into an old cigar box on the bookshelf. No name on it, no address, just a reminder for the days ahead. The next morning I called my daughter again. Tanya, I said, I'm thinking about selling the house. There was a pause. You serious? Dead serious, I said. Too many ghosts in here. I need something smaller, simpler, something that doesn't smell like old memories and betrayal. She offered to help look. I accepted. For the first time in a long while, I felt excited. Not in a flashy, wild way, but in the quiet anticipation of possibility. Lorraine once told me I was a man of habit. She was right. But even habits break when the people you trusted use them to stab you in the back. So I was going to break a few. Sell the house, buy a truck I didn't need. Take the road trip Lorraine always talked about, but never took. And maybe, just maybe, find out who I am without her shadow on my back. I sold the house 2 weeks later. Didn't make a big deal out of it. Called a realtor, signed some papers, boxed up what little I wanted to keep, and let the rest go. People collect too much over a lifetime. Furniture, dishes, photos, guilt. I left most of it behind. What mattered fit in the back of my truck. I bought a newer Ford, nothing fancy, just enough muscle to get me out of town without rattling apart on the highway. Tanya helped me pack, tried not to cry when I handed her a few boxes of old family keepsakes. For your kids, I told her. They'll need to know where they come from, but they don't need to carry my ghosts. We hugged for a long time. Not the kind of hug you give when someone's leaving for the weekend. The kind that says, I know you've been through hell, and I see you standing on the other side of it. And then I hit the road. No destination, just west. I pointed the truck toward the sunset and let the wheels carry me. Arizona, maybe. Colorado. I didn't care. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. Every mile was mine. I stopped at cheap motels, diners with cracked booths and real coffee, roadside gas stations where old men nodded at me like we all knew something the world forgot. At night I'd park near rivers or fields, open the window, and breathe. No whispers in the hallways, no perfume on pillows that didn't belong to me. Just wind, crickets, silence that healed instead of hurt. And somewhere along that stretch of road, between a dusty two-pump station and a diner that served the best pecan pie I'd had in 20 years, it hit me. They didn't break me. They bent me, sure. Made me question everything I thought was solid. But they didn't get the best of me, because the best of me was still here, driving, laughing with strangers, tipping extra at breakfast counters, living without shame or suspicion. I thought a lot about Rick during those drives, about Lorraine, too. I wondered where they ended up, if they found new people to lie to, or if they were finally facing their own reflections. I didn't wish them well, but I didn't wish them harm either. Some people carry their own punishment. They live in it, sleep in it, wake up next to it every damn day. That was enough. One morning, just outside Flagstaff, I pulled into a small park overlooking Red Rock canyons. I climbed out, stretched, and watched the sun rise over the cliffs. No distractions, no memories trying to crawl back into my mind. Just light. And for the first time in years, I wasn't remembering. I was simply being. I ended up in a small town in New Mexico. Just a blip on the map. The kind of place you drive through without a second glance. But something about it made me pull over. Maybe it was the old wooden sign that said, "Welcome to Clearwater, stay a while." Or maybe it was just the exhaustion of the road finally catching up to me. I checked into a dusty little inn with creaky floors and a front desk clerk who looked like he hadn't smiled in a decade. The room smelled like mothballs and lemon cleaner, but it had a bed, a fan, and a door that locked. Good enough. That evening I wandered into a local bar, the kind where everybody knows each other and strangers are greeted with cautious curiosity. I sat at the far end, ordered a whiskey neat, and kept to myself. A man sat a few stools down, gray beard, worn hands, denim shirt with a rip in the sleeve. We nodded like men do, wordlessly, without need for small talk. But after a few minutes he glanced my way and said, "You passing through or running from something?" I didn't flinch. "Little of both," I replied. He chuckled. "Aren't we all?" We started talking, nothing deep at first. Weather, gas prices, the terrible jukebox in the corner. But as the night stretched on and the drinks went down smoother, stories started spilling out. He told me his wife had left him 20 years ago for his best friend. Said they ran off together, bought a boat, and lost it all in less than a year. "Guess karma sails faster than love," he said with a half smile. I leaned in. "And you?" he asked, eyes sharp despite the alcohol. "What's your wound?" I didn't go into detail, just said my brother and my wife did the unthinkable, that I lost everything but kept my name. He nodded slowly. "They always think they're smarter than us, that we're too blind or too slow to notice. But we see it. We just choose grace, until grace turns to fire." That hit me harder than expected. We sat in silence for a bit after that. Two old men with too much history and not enough patience, left for lies. Before leaving, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You'll get there, friend. Healing's just remembering without bleeding." Back in my room, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin lazily above me. He was right. I was remembering. Not with hate, not with anger, but with distance. That barstool conversation with a stranger did something Lorraine's apology never could. It reminded me that betrayal wasn't the end of my story, just the middle. A messy, brutal middle. But the end? That was still mine to write. A few days later, I found myself driving north again. No destination in mind, just chasing clean air and quiet roads. The highway curved through pine forests and dusty plains, and for once I wasn't thinking about the past, just the rhythm of the tires and the song on the radio. That is, until my phone rang. I don't get many calls. Tanya, maybe once or twice a week, the occasional check-in from the realtor handling the house sale. But this number, unknown. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. I sighed, pulled over, and answered. "Jack," a voice croaked. "It's Rick." My blood went cold, not from fear, from sheer disbelief. I didn't say anything, just waited. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he said. But I needed to call. I didn't know who else to talk to. I should have hung up. Every part of me screamed to do it. But some twisted part of me, the part that still remembered building forts with him in the backyard as kids, stayed on the line. "I messed up," he continued. "Big time. Lorraine's gone. Took off a month ago. Left me in a motel with nothing but a stack of bills and a dead transmission." I stayed silent. "I didn't call to beg," he added quickly. I don't know. I wanted to hear a voice that knew me, even if it hates me now." I finally spoke. "Rick, there's a reason people like you end up alone. You don't break a man's life and then expect him to help you sweep up the pieces." He went quiet. Then, "I know. I deserve that." I could tell he was crying, or close to it. "I just wanted to say sorry, not to fix anything, just to say it. You didn't deserve what I did to you." There it was, the apology I never thought would come. Too late, of course. Too broken, like someone handing you back a shattered vase they dropped a year ago and expecting you to thank them. "I don't hate you, Rick," I said finally. "But I don't forgive you either, and I don't owe you a damn thing." He sniffed. "I know." I hung up. No yelling, no closure, just an ending. And that's all I ever really needed. For years, I thought closure meant understanding, talking it through, getting answers. But sometimes, closure is just silence. A door closed and locked. A chapter written, signed and shelved. And once I ended that call, I realized he wasn't chasing redemption. He was chasing what I still had. Peace. After that call, something in me shifted again, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the way a foundation finally settles after an earthquake. You don't always notice it right away, but suddenly, things feel more solid, stable, like the ground beneath your feet is finally done trembling. I spent the next few weeks in a small town just outside Durango. Found a short-term rental with a porch that overlooked a narrow creek, and I let myself live slow. I cooked simple meals, read paperback novels I bought for 50 cents a pop, and sat outside every evening with a cup of black coffee and the rustling of leaves. One night I walked into a diner down the road. Small place, red vinyl booths, white tile floors, waitresses who called you hone without even thinking. I sat in the corner by the window, ordered meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and pulled out a book. Halfway through the meal, a woman around my age, maybe a little younger, took the booth across from me. She smiled, polite, but not flirtatious, and pulled out her own book. We didn't talk, just read. But it felt normal, comforting, like being in the same quiet rhythm as someone without needing to explain a thing. Eventually, she finished her coffee and stood up. As she passed my table, she said, "You look like a man who's finally figured some things out." I looked up. "You'd be surprised how long it takes." She chuckled. "No, I wouldn't." And with that, she left. I didn't even catch her name, but I sat there staring at my half-eaten pie and smiled. It was the first time in years I felt like myself around another person. No mask, no bitterness, just me, plain and whole. Later that night, back on the porch, I thought about all the things I'd lost. A wife I once trusted, a brother I once admired, a life I once thought was built on something solid. But in losing them, I gained something I never expected: freedom. Not just the freedom to go where I wanted or live how I pleased, but freedom from the weight of other people's choices, from wondering what I could have done differently, from carrying blame that was never mine. It was like stepping out of a burning house and realizing the fire wasn't your fault, and the fresh air waiting outside had been there all along. I still had years ahead of me. Maybe not as many as I used to, but enough. Enough time to build something new. Not to replace what was lost, but to honor the part of me that survived, and maybe, just maybe, share a booth again someday. With someone who orders their coffee black and doesn't lie. It had been nearly 6 months since I left home. Funny how quickly the idea of home changes when the people who made it aren't there anymore. Or worse, never deserved to be. The house, the photos, the shared bathroom cabinets. None of it mattered now. It was all just stuff, echoes. But there were some things I did carry. In the glove compartment of my truck, I kept a small stack of index cards, each one scribbled with something I wanted to remember. Not regrets, just lessons, reminders from the wreckage. One said, "Don't confuse history with loyalty." Another, "If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." And the one I read the most often, "You can forgive someone and still never want to see them again." I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't wake up thinking about Lorraine or Rick, or wondering if they'd crawled out of the mess they'd made. But every once in a while, when I saw a couple laughing together at a diner, or when a brother and sister walked past my porch arm in arm, a flicker would spark in my chest. Not pain, not envy, just what could have been. I think that's the hardest part of betrayal, not the act itself, but the theft of the life you thought you had. You mourn things that were never real. You grieve for versions of people that only existed in your head. But over time, even that grief gets tired. It quiets down and settles in your bones like old weather. You learn to carry it without letting it shape you. One afternoon, I drove out to a small lake I'd heard about from a local fisherman. It was calm, glassy, surrounded by tall trees that whispered when the wind moved through. I sat on a rock near the edge and tossed pebbles into the water, watching the ripples stretch and fade. And I thought about the version of me that existed a year ago. The man who rushed to help his brother without hesitation. The man who never once checked the shadows behind his wife's smile. That man was gone. But I wasn't bitter about it. Because the man sitting on the rock, he was better, stronger, wiser, not harder, just sharper, more careful with his love, more selective with his trust, more deliberate with his time. And for the first time, I stopped wondering if I'd ever get back what I lost. I didn't want it back. I wanted forward. So I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and walked back to the truck. Another quiet road waited ahead, and I had miles left to go before I decided where I wanted to stop. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else in the passenger seat. Back at the rental house, I sat down one night with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. Not out of loneliness, those days were behind me, but because I needed to put something into words, something that had lived too long in my chest. I wasn't planning to send it. In fact, I burned it after writing it. But still, I needed to write to her, to Lorraine. Not the woman who lied, who betrayed, who left a trail of ruin in her wake, but the woman I thought she was, the version that used to hum while cooking breakfast, that laughed at my old jokes and held my hand when the world got too loud. Here's what I wrote. Lorraine, I used to believe we had something unbreakable. I used to believe that what we built was stronger than temptation or boredom or lies. But I was wrong, and I don't write this to shame you. God knows you've probably already done that to yourself. Or maybe not. I write this because I need to let you go completely. I carried your betrayal like a sack of stones for months, years even. I told myself I was healing, but really, I was just dragging it behind me, letting it slow me down while pretending I was fine. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I'm just done. You didn't ruin me. You showed me who you really were. And in doing that, you gave me a strange gift, clarity. I see you clearly now. I see Rick, too. Two people who took the easiest road, no matter the damage left behind. Two people who confused desire with love and selfishness with freedom. I wish you peace. I wish you the kind of silence I had to fight tooth and nail to find. I hope it visits you at night when the noise of your choices fades. But don't mistake this letter as an olive branch. There's no going back, no repairing what was never real to begin with. Goodbye, Lorraine. Jack. I folded the letter, held it in my hands for a long moment, then tossed it into the fireplace. Watched the corners curl and blacken until all that was left were embers and ash. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Sometimes, healing isn't about confronting someone. It's not about demanding apologies or delivering parting shots. Sometimes, healing is writing something you'll never send, and then watching it burn. About a week after burning that letter, I got a voicemail. Tanya. I hadn't heard from her in a while. We'd spoken here and there, short, simple updates. I knew she was still in the city, working hard, going to therapy, doing the heavy lifting of putting herself back together after the collapse of our family. But her message this time sounded different. Hey, Dad. I was thinking about driving out your way. I've got a long weekend coming up. Thought maybe we could get dinner, or just sit on a porch and not talk at all. Let me know. I smiled. When your life falls apart, you start to learn which pieces are actually worth picking back up. Tanya was one of them, maybe the only one that ever truly mattered. I called her back and said, I'll cook. She laughed. God help us both. 2 days later, she pulled up in a little rental car, stepped out, and immediately wrapped her arms around me. We stood there for a long moment, no words, no hurry, just father and daughter, survivors. Inside, we shared a meal that probably wouldn't impress any cookbook writer. Overcooked chicken, too much pepper in the potatoes. But it didn't matter. We laughed, we talked, and in between the stories and shared silences, she looked at me and said, You're different. I raised an eyebrow. Worse or better? She thought for a second. More real, lighter, like you're not trying to fix everything anymore. I nodded. I finally figured out I don't have to. Later that night, we sat outside with coffee mugs in hand and a blanket draped over both our knees. The stars above us were brighter than anything I remembered from the city, and the creek whispered through the trees behind us. She looked over at me. "Do you ever think about going back? To the house? To all of it?" I shook my head. There's nothing left for me there, and I'm not the man I was back then. She didn't ask more. She just leaned her head on my shoulder. And I realized, for the first time since everything fell apart, I wasn't waiting for closure. I wasn't bracing for another betrayal. I wasn't trying to outrun the past. I was living, not starting over, just continuing. With intention, with the people who truly mattered. Tanya didn't need me to be perfect. She just needed me to be present. And that's exactly who I'd become. The kind of man who knew what he stood for, and more importantly, what he'd never tolerate again. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in careful block letters. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed. Rick passed away last week, massive heart attack. No funeral, no family to claim the body. He was cremated and placed in a county vault. This is just to inform you, as next of kin. County Clerk's Office. I stared at the letter for a long time. Rick was gone, just like that. No dramatic ending, no final confrontation, no grand moment of truth or apology that tied things up neatly. Just gone. A name on a form, a body in a government storage unit, and with that, something inside me finally gave way. It wasn't relief. It wasn't grief. It was emptiness. He'd been a storm in my life for so long that I didn't know what it felt like to exist without the thunder rumbling in the distance. My whole life, Rick had been the shadow behind me. Sometimes a friend, sometimes a rival, sometimes a knife in the back. Now there was nothing. I folded the letter and tossed it in the drawer. No need to keep it. No need to mark the date or light a candle. He had made his choices. He had built the road that led him to that lonely, unclaimed ending. And he had burned every bridge that could have led him somewhere else. But that night, I still sat by the fire and let myself remember. Not the man he became, but the boy I used to run barefoot with through cornfields, dodging bees and throwing rocks at tin cans. The teenager who once took a punch for me at school. The best man at my wedding, standing beside me with tears in his eyes. That version of him. I mourned for that. Because somewhere along the way, he let that boy die. I didn't go to his funeral. There was none to attend. But I still said goodbye in my own way. I stood in the woods the next morning, alone with the wind and the pine needles underfoot, and I whispered, "You could have had more. You should have had more. But you threw it all away. I hope you finally found peace, Rick." Then I turned and walked away, not looking back. I didn't carry him with me this time. No guilt, no anger, just space. And in that space I felt something new. Not forgiveness, but freedom. A month after Rick's death, I got a call from an attorney in our hometown. Turns out Rick had left behind a few personal items. Nothing of real value. Some clothes, a rusted-out motorcycle, a few notebooks filled with half-finished thoughts and bitter scribbles, and one key to a storage unit. I almost didn't go. Part of me thought, why disturb what's already buried? But curiosity, mixed with something I couldn't quite name, got the better of me. The unit sat on the edge of town, tucked between a liquor store and a mechanic's garage. The metal door groaned as I pulled it up. Dust clouded the air, thick and stale. And there it was, boxes, old furniture, a broken guitar, and a few photo albums. I stood there for a long moment, Everything in that unit was a testament to a man who had no place to put his life, no one to leave it with, no home that would accept the weight of his choices. I didn't cry, but I felt still. I sorted through the boxes slowly, carefully, tossing most of it. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I was looking for a clean end. At the very back of the unit, buried under a tarp, I found something that stopped me cold. A framed photo. It was of me and Rick. We were maybe 25, standing in front of a beat-up old truck, arms around each other, laughing like fools, back before life had teeth, before betrayal, before lies, before the crash. On the back, scribbled in faded ink, were 4 words: before we lost everything. I stared at those words for a long time, because he knew. Maybe not right away, maybe not even until it was too late. But somewhere inside him, Rick knew what he'd thrown away. He just never had the guts to say it out loud. I didn't take the photo with me. I set it down, gently, like laying a ghost to rest. Then I locked the unit, turned in the key, and walked away. The past would stay there, dust-covered, closed up, and I wouldn't carry it anymore. Back home, I opened my own storage closet for the first time in years, tossed out old memories I no longer needed, photos of a life that wasn't real, wedding gifts from a marriage built on lies, birthday cards signed by 2 people who had destroyed everything they once claimed to love. By sundown, the house was lighter, and so was I. Because sometimes, before you can build something new, you have to clear the house. I live in a smaller house now. 1 story, simple, quiet. The kind of place that doesn't creak with memories or echo with someone else's lies. Just a home. Mine. With worn hardwood floors, a porch that catches the morning light, and a kitchen that always smells like coffee and cedar. There's no sign of Lorraine here, no trace of Rick. Just peace. Tanya visits every few weeks. Sometimes she brings a friend or a guy she's dating, sometimes just herself. We sit outside, drink coffee, talk about things that matter, and more often, things that don't. That's the gift of healing, not needing every conversation to mean something, just being able to be. The locals know me now, the guy who volunteers at the library, fixes broken porch lights for neighbors, and brings cornbread to potlucks, even though it's always too dry. I'm not the man who got betrayed anymore. I'm just Jack, and I like him. There are no great revenge stories to tell, no final confrontations that played out like a movie. Just a slow, steady reclaiming of my life. A quiet rebuild, brick by brick. With no fanfare, no audience, only one truth guiding the way. I may have been broken, but I wasn't destroyed. I lost a brother, I lost a wife, but I found myself. And that man. The one who didn't let bitterness rot his soul. The one who didn't strike back with cruelty, who didn't need to scream to be heard. He's someone I'm proud of. Some days I still think about Rick, about what could have been, about how thin the line was between loyalty and blindness. But I don't carry anger, I carry lessons. Heavy at first, but lighter now with time. And Lorraine, I haven't heard from her since the divorce was finalized. Don't know if she stayed with Rick until the end, or if she left him too. Doesn't matter. I've stopped trying to understand her. Sometimes people hurt you, not because they're evil, but because they're empty, and nothing you give them will ever fill that. I look around at this little life I built from the ashes. It's not flashy. It won't be written about in history books, but it's honest, and finally, it's mine. If you're reading this, maybe you're where I once was, blindsided, betrayed, angry at the weight you're forced to carry. And I won't give you some empty line about time healing all wounds, but I will tell you this: you can lose everything and still come out clean on the other side.